Yeah, so first, just want to say welcome to everybody. I am hosting you today from Boulder, Colorado. So I'm on a different continent than you normally see me. And had you seen me earlier today or yesterday, I would be in a rain jacket with like a winter hat and looking very out of character for the tropical version of me that people have gotten so used to. But I'm here with Penny, exploring the world. There's Penny. She's going to sit quietly on the sides and listen in. And getting to meet her family and friends and just having a really nice time. And I got to say, playing in the snow, I sort of miss it. It's really a beautiful thing. We had nice powdery snow, like good Rocky Mountain snow yesterday. So today we're going to be talking about the healing power of stillness. And Urvi is going to recite a poem for us in just a moment. But before she does, I want to share with you how the host team came to this topic, because it's just so interesting. We have a very non-linear and emergent process every week. And as we were feeling into what happened during the webinar last week and during the community calls, we could feel just a really deep like engagement and connection and lots of strong feelings and just a feeling of significance about the things we're talking about. And also we could feel that there wasn't a shared way among us to hold the difficult feelings. There wasn't a shared way among us to explore how healing occurs when we feel into how to belong in a place and how to live into a story of a landscape. When each of us, as we do that, we come into so many difficult feelings, so many different feelings about our past, about our personal histories, about our ethnic or cultural histories, about genocides and violence and destruction, and just so many things that are connected to landscapes all over the world. That what we felt was really clear for us in the community call, or from the community calls when our host team met, was that we needed to have some practical ways to hold all of those complex emotions. And we needed to have one clear way together to begin talking about that. I think many of us personally here as participants, we have our own ways of dealing with all of these complex emotions. But we felt it would be really powerful to offer a healing paradigm, a way of healing that each of us can practice in our own personal ways, but that we can share understandings of together. And I recall when I was studying the philosophy of science and I read Thomas Kuhn and How Scientific Revolutions Occur, where he basically introduced the term paradigm and made it popular. And one of the key things that he observed back in the 1930s and 40s was that to change from one paradigm to another, you actually need the new paradigm. That to go from an old coherent way of thinking as it breaks down, you just remain in frustration until you have a coherent new way of thinking that takes all of those feelings and thoughts and puts them together again. And so what I wanted to offer today was a little version of that. How could we explore a healing paradigm? There are many others than this one, but how could we explore one that could bring all of us into coherence as we explore these complex feelings? And to help us prepare for this, we have a poem, and Urvi has offered to recite it to us. And Urvi, would you like to introduce the poem and read it? I'd love to invite you on right now. Let me highlight you so everyone can see you.
Yes. So I'm going to read a poem called A Good Place to Start. It was actually written by our co-host Maya, who couldn't be on the webinar live today because she's on a flight. So I have the joy to come and see Joe and Penny in Colorado. So I have the joy of sharing her creation with you. And I invite us all to actually just close our eyes, if you feel so inclined, and just take a deep breath or two. And just invite a little sense of stillness in your body with which you can receive this beautiful poem. a good place to start. Look all around you. Take in the scene. Can you say for certain that it's not a dream? Forget what you know. You can't know it's true. Except for one thing, the being of you. And so, may I ask with heartfelt intention, what is this you that you always mention? What is it that's looking out from your eyes? What might that be without its disguise? It's hard to pin down, and words can't convey it. Even the masters can't really say it. It's not that the matter is so complicated. It's simpler than all the words that might state it. So what do you see when you ask, who am I? To say, I don't know, would not be a lie. And telling the truth is a good place to start when you're asking a question that comes from the heart. But what do you do when you know you don't know? What do you look for? Where do you go? The answer is here, and it's here long before the mind can begin to search and explore. The task of self-knowledge is not for the mind. There's nothing to solve and nothing to find. The question of who is something you feel when you see what's not you and remain as what's real. The question of who is something you sense when you are as you are without pretense. So stop. For one moment, be utterly still. Silence reveals whatever it will. Vast and open, limitless being. Awareness, presence, consciousness, seeing. Remain as you are, as you've always been. Now this is a very good place to begin. Just one more deep breath and open your eyes when you feel ready.
It's so special to have Maya on our host team with such incredible gifts. And I feel really lucky that I get to give her a hug either this afternoon, if she gets in time, or tomorrow. Urvi, thank you. That was just beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful. And what a perfect place to begin. As the poet says, a perfect place to begin. And I'd like to share my screen now and get started with the presentation. Today, we're going to talk about the healing power of stillness. And I have this photograph of my daughter. That's Elise. 2.5 years ago at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And what I want to show you is how this magnificent lake is filled with stillness, but there's something else. There's this innocent being touching the floor of the lake with her toes as the ripples move away from her. And I want you to imagine how naturally she's about 2.5 years old in this photograph. Imagine how naturally a 2.5-year-old child knows how to stay with their stillness as they move about. That no one ever taught her otherwise. And you can see it in her whole being. You can see it in her face as she smiles, looking down at the ripples in her toes. You can see it in the turn of her hip and her knees as she moves herself into the next sensation of what she's experiencing. And you can see it in the lake as the center of action and the center of being is coordinated in the exploratory play of innocence and joy. There's great healing power in stillness. And one of our great teachers is the children. The children have much to teach us. not about stillness in the absence of motion, but stillness in the absence of turmoil within. How do they find it, and why did they not need to look? Most of us feel more like this boy, this little kid who grew a little bigger. I like this picture because it captures for me something really important, which is that in our age of what Douglas Rushkoff calls present shock, where we're constantly bombarded with so much information that we remain in a perpetually interrupted and confused present moment, unable to make sense of what's happening around us, that we may feel listless and not know how to take action. And the next information takes us off center yet again, and our center never arrives. This is the way of being of most adults in the world today who are very much not like little Elise playing in Lake Atitlan. When you think of the entire planetary context that we're in, this gets amplified because the state of the world as we know it today causes pain. So if we pay attention to what's happening in the world, it takes us off our center and makes it very hard for us to find calmness inside. And interestingly, the risks and the threats and the dangers of the knowledge that we have about the world is harmful to us. And it's actually a healthy response, psychologically and emotionally, to shut it out. It's a healthy response to shut off all of the signals of the world that would cause us pain, even if they're true. But as a result, this means we no longer feel what is happening around us, and we're unable to discern or take intelligent actions, which means if we pay attention to what's happening in the world, we'll be unable to find that stillness within because we'll also secretly hate ourselves or be embarrassed or feel ashamed because we're not doing something that we feel we should be doing. So either we block out the world and remain in denial, or we notice that we're not acting in the world in the way that we should, and we feel ashamed. In either case, the knowledge about the world takes us away from stillness and takes us away from peace within. And this creates a paradox that we need to have a way of addressing. And if you recall things like this planetary boundaries framework that says, oh my God, we've gone over the limits, we're in so much danger. That knowing what this means is like being that young man in the picture before. We're filled with stimulating information that creates alertness and risk, feelings of danger and confusion, and can cause paralysis so that we don't take action. And notice that even though he's sitting still, he does not have stillness within. So the question is, when we have this planetary context held around us, what does it do to us? What I think it does is something kind of like this. We start to see so many problems in the world, and we just become overwhelmed with fears and dangers of pandemics and propaganda that spreads lies and deceit, the next war. Oh my God, there are wildfires just burning through our towns. There are displaced people, there are floods and droughts. And for those of us who pay attention to the natural world, there's destruction of landscapes, there's extinctions of species. None of this tells us how to be still. Meaning that all of this information, while it may be true, doesn't help us to heal. And if we are going to hold the complexity of how we feel about things like this, we need to find a place from which to begin processing it all that allows us to move into love and service afterwards. In this learning journey so far, we've talked about some really important topics. We've talked about how to design for belonging and why most of us don't feel like we belong. We've talked about being found and the art and science of how to enable ourselves to be found in these situations of mutual nourishment that we so desperately need. We've explored the story of place and how our story of place evokes the kinds of emotions we were just talking about, these complex, difficult things. So what we've done is we've prepared a set of attractors, things we would be drawn toward. How can I belong? How can I be found? And what is my healthy story of place? But what we haven't had is a paradigm for healing. So what I want to offer today is that one of the most important paradigms for healing in a time of turbulent exponential change is stillness. But what is stillness? How would we define it in a way that we can all understand together? I really like this quote by Brené Brown, who some of you will know about her amazing work, where she's helped people to find nurturance and healing in very difficult situations. And she says, stillness is not about focusing on nothingness. It's about creating an emotional clearing to allow ourselves to feel, think, dream, and question. What is an emotional clearing? What does that even mean? How can our emotions be jumbled and in the way? And what would it mean to clear them? And how does emotional clearing allow us to feel, to think, to dream, or to question? What I want to explore with you today is a set of very specific practices that I've developed in my life, because I want to tell you some personal stories and try and make this as concrete as possible about how I have achieved emotional clearing to be able to feel, think, dream, and question effectively, so that we can all together have a shared paradigm of healing for our stories of place and how to belong. For me, stillness is the ability to feel or to receive new energy as it arrives, to feel it and make sense of it. What I love about this image is that there are these stones sitting in the water and something caused a ripple. And because the stones are sitting still, they have some way of feeling or receiving the energy when it comes. But if the stones themselves were moving, you would create an interference pattern. There would be an interference of the ripples created by the stone and the ripples created in the water. And this is a great secret of Eastern philosophy that you'll find in martial arts, in Taoism, in Buddhism, in practices like Kung Fu, in yoga and Tai Chi, is that if you can find a way to be centered and grounded in yourself, you can make sense of the energy as it arrives to you by the way that you feel it. But if you are not in your center, if you are not yourself calm and grounded, you'll be confused about which energy is yours and which energy is in the world. My computer is locking up again for some reason. Come on. Oh, I see. What's going on? There we go. I want to share with you a little story. This photo was taken in 2013 when I was on a bike tour in the Canadian Rockies. This is in an area called the Kootenays, just south of Banff. And you can see the little remnants of ice on the stone faces above. That is the last of a giant glacier that used to cover the mountain. And what I did in this moment that the photograph was taken was I sat grieving the death of a glacier. And I want to share with you how I found stillness in something so sad and so significant. At the time, I was bike touring, which means I was carrying a lot of weight and camping at night, riding on a bicycle through the mountains. So I was really connected to my body on a daily basis for hours at a time. And I was reading a book called The Goldilocks Planet, which explores how the Earth is not too hot, not too cold, not too acidic, not too basic, so that once life occurred, it continually remained for the next 3.5 billion years up to the present day. And while reading that book, I learned things like the fact that there's continually been ice on Antarctica for 24 million years. And as I was sitting next to this melting mountain glacier, I couldn't help but think about how human activities today and human-caused climate change may cause Antarctica to be without ice for the first time in 24 million years. And as I sat in that depth of time, of millions and millions of years, I was able to feel a calmness at the small gesture that was the death of a glacier. And in the deepness of geologic time, I was able to sit in peace within myself. So one of the ways that I found healing about the grief caused to me by climate change was to learn how to sit within a mental space of deep geologic time. And so there are two aspects of this practice that you can see in this photograph. One is that I was able to sit physically in a calm position because my body was healthy and my daily routine of biking and camping was connecting me very deeply to my body. And that I was able to sit into a deep stillness of semantics and story by feeling the death of a glacier caused by global warming, by putting it in the context of millions of years of geologic change and a planetary scale perspective, which made me a tiny, tiny speck of insignificance in a giant universe of evolutionary change. And my stillness was in my smallness. Rather than feeling hopeless, helpless, and powerless, I felt calm and at peace as I gave love to death. And the stillness within me was my place in space and time as someone who was insignificant. This is a great secret of the healing practice of stillness, is sometimes our stillness is that we don't seek to take action. We simply bear witness to what is occurring because we know our actions won't make a difference anyway. There was nothing I could do to stop this tiny house-sized glacier that used to be as big as a mountain. There's no way I could keep it from dying. And in my smallness and insignificance, I gave up. I surrendered, and I was able to find stillness and peace while giving love to change in the world. And that opened up my pathway of going from crippling ecological grief to the regeneration of the earth in the next few years. This moment was a pivotal moment in that journey for me. Like I said about riding the bicycle through the mountains, I want to share with you my most powerful regenerative practice. That's my foot. You can see little remnants of toenail polish because I have a 5-year-old who likes to paint her daddy's toenails. And you might notice I'm pretty flexible. I can wrap my hand all the way around the end of my foot because every day for about 90 minutes, I have a movement and stretching routine that combines deep stretching, breathing exercises, martial arts movements, dance techniques, things that I've learned to connect me to my body and build a sense of calm and stillness in myself. And every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, I get up out of bed, and I go through a morning ritual to get ready. And then I spend the next hour and a half connecting deeply to my body, which has enabled me to find a kind of stillness in myself that even though in the last year and a half, I've gone through incredible changes, deep emotional turbulence, the destruction of one of my most important relationships in my life as a marriage of 15 years and a relationship of 18 years dissolved around me, feeling into accelerating changes of planetary collapse with a global pandemic, with wildfires burning continents and towns, all kinds of things happening that could have taken me away from my center. But because I had developed a daily routine and simple movement sequences to connect me to my body, slowly, day by day, there grew a stillness that could hold and give love to all of it. And I want to share with you that this is extremely important. The basis of our ability to practice stillness as a healing art is to connect to our bodies. And that's how, in this moment, in the end of November last year, when I was being embraced into my community and about to begin a 2-month trial of change that actually did break me. A big part of who I was before had to die, and I had to hospice that part of myself. And even as I sat in the midst of the crucible of this change, you can just see it in my being. Because at this point in time, I had been practicing my daily stretching routine every day for almost 7 months. And in 7 months of daily practice, any time that I felt the turbulence around me, I could feel the stillness in my body and immediately become calm and feel the wave of changes washing over me like a pebble in the stream. And the magic of this, the wisdom practice, the mastery and the art was a daily stretch routine. So while it's invisible in this scene, that the reason I could be in stillness right next to the flames as they were burning away a big part of my life is because I had devoted myself to finding calmness within by simply connecting to my body. And this is of so much importance, I'm just going to repeat it over and over again. You cannot imagine, if you haven't done it, what daily practice to connect with your body will do to force you to change, to guide you to open up, to release you to be free, and to find stillness within. The paradigm of stillness that I'm wanting to describe to you works like this. The basis of it all is body connection. As you feel into your connections with your body, which you can do with breathing exercises, you could do it with yoga or martial arts, you could do it with dance or sports or theater, you could do it with singing or playing musical instruments. All of these are bodily connections. And as you connect to your body, you will cultivate a grounded calmness in your being. And this grounded calmness in your being, cultivated through your body connection, is how you are able to feel what is happening in the moment, because your body is a sense-making organism. And as you feel into what is happening around you, from a place of grounded calm, the actions you take will be heartfelt and something magical occurs. You will receive the gift of connection. And it's absolutely amazing what connection does. When your body is connected, it's sort of like the difference between, imagine a situation where maybe you have a love in your life partner, and your partner is about to leave the house, and you absentmindedly give them a kiss on the cheek because you're busy and you're not being present. And now imagine as they leave that it's the last time you ever see them. Maybe there was a car accident, maybe something terrible occurred. And the last moment that you were with them was not a heartfelt action. It was an absent-minded, habitual behavior without presence. Contrast that with how you would feel if you looked that person in the eyes, gave them an earnest hug, and kissed them on the cheek and said, "I love you," while being present to your body's connection to what was happening in the moment. You see, the difference is by being connected, you are able to receive the gift that we very cleverly name in English, the present. Because the present, as we know in English, is another word for a gift. And so receiving the gift comes from heartfelt action, which arises from feeling what is happening in the moment, which only occurs if we're grounded and calm in the moment, which means our body needs to be grounded and calm in that moment. And you see, this paradigm of stillness that begins in body connection could not possibly be any other way. And that's why when I reach down to touch my toes, and I have to pay attention to what I'm doing so I don't hyperextend my knee or pull a muscle in my back by moving too quickly, or any other thing that could make that a harmful action, is based in body awareness and body connection to the present moment. And this is the paradigm of stillness. I want to explore it further with you and how it works, because something terrible happened yesterday and I got to practice. This is a photograph taken the night before last, 36 hours ago, in the Bioparque in Barichara, when the firefighters, the bomberos de Barichara, went out at around 2 o'clock in the morning to put out a fire that was set by a pyromaniac. How do I know it was a pyromaniac? Because on Sunday night, someone went and started 2 fires in the Bioparque, and Thursday night they went back and burned more of our precious community forest to the ground. And when I awoke in the morning, on Friday morning, and I looked on Facebook and I saw this message from the bomberos, which is the firefighters of Barichara, and they had a video of fires burning my lover. Do you guys remember that my lover during the time of solitude was the land? Barichara has this beautiful place, Bioparque Moncora, which was one of my sacred loves. One of the places that held me in peace and tranquility through a time of suffering and solitude. And someone was attacking it and burning it to the ground just for the joy of destroying. And as I looked on, as my precious Bioparque was being burned, I noticed something. I was calm. I was still. Because I watched this video just before I was to start my stretch routine. And what I did was I just began my stretch routine. I breathed into my movements and started doing neck rolls and shoulder rolls and swinging my arms and flexing my ankles and bending my knees and doing all of the stretching that put me into my body. And by now I've been doing my stretch routine daily for more than a year. And immediately my body gave me stillness and peace. And my body filled up with love for the bioparque. It filled up for my dear friends, Camila and Vicky. Their hearts are literally in the ground of this place. How do they feel? Are they okay? What's happening to others in Barichara is they're watching someone destroying this precious place. And the stillness remained. And after I finished my stretch routine, I went and talked to Penny because I'm here staying in her apartment. And I said, I don't quite know how to feel about this because I'm just so calm. And then as I started to speak, it came to me. I needed to contact my friend Felipe and ask him to organize a healing circle. That I imagined the kind of drifter who probably passed through Barichara and started these fires, and how much abuse and trauma they must have felt to just feel the need to destroy something beautiful to help them feel better. And I began to have compassion and love for whoever started this fire. And I started to feel that the soil would be grateful for the released carbon of the ashes, and that I could go to these fire sites and plant trees and cultivate soil, and that I look forward to returning to Barichara and healing this land. What I want you to notice in these emotional responses is I never got angry. I didn't get scared. And while I did have a couple of feelings of sadness, I never once judged the person who did this. And I came very quickly to acceptance of what was occurring, and from there moved fluidly and seamlessly to love and compassion. The reason I was able to do that is that I felt it through my body as I did my stretch routine. And this transformed all of my emotions into loving actions. So that after I was done, it was late enough in the morning, I could send messages of support to Camila and Vicky. I could ask Felipe to organize a healing circle, and I could express my love and compassion for the victim, the real victim, which is the perpetrator. The real victim of this is the person who could not feel the beauty of the bioparque and needed to burn it instead. And their victimhood is their inability to receive love. Because anyone who can burn the bioparque to the ground is someone who is not able to feel love. And they immediately are worthy of my compassion and my pity. And that's what happened to me because I was in a place of stillness. There's a very simple sequence for how this works. And this is something that comes from pro-social training. And the sequence comes in 4 steps. The first is to have a bodily capacity to notice how you feel inside. And from that feeling inside, which will allow me to advance, the computer's going slow for some reason. From noticing to immediately move to accepting whatever we notice. And this is the hardest part, to accept what we notice within ourselves without judgment. So instead of feeling sad or angry when the bioparque was burning, I accepted that I didn't know how I felt. And by accepting that I didn't know how I felt, instead of thinking, is there something wrong with me? Why don't I know how I feel? I just accepted it without judgment. And it was from there that I could move into clarifying my intentions, which is what I did over the next 2 hours. This wasn't in an instant. I took 2 hours of working with my body for 90 minutes and then talking to Penny after she awoke and calling Camila and Vicky to send the messages of love. I clarified my intentions by accepting what was happening without judgment. Only after clarifying my intentions could I create actions. What I want to show you is that the paradigm of stillness is in these 2 steps. Instead of going from noticing something to creating actions, to feeling an impulse and responding, it's to create a little space between feeling and behavior where we notice, accept, and clarify. And the more we notice, accept, and clarify in ourselves, the more stillness we realize has been cultivated. Stillness is an externality. Stillness is an unexpected benefit. Stillness is not the purpose of this sequence. Stillness is the consequence of it. That when we notice how we're feeling and accept it without judgment and move into clarity of what we intend and what we care about, we are coming from a place of stillness, whether we realize it or not. This is very important. So what is an emotional clearing? And how does it allow us to feel, think, dream, and question? An emotional clearing is by accepting the emotions we have as they occur, by noticing our feelings and accepting them. It's not about not feeling, it's about how we respond to how we're feeling. And how does it allow us to feel? It allows us to feel with honesty and authenticity. How does it allow us to think? We can think based on the self-knowledge of how we actually feel. How does it allow us to dream? Because when we are able to feel honestly and authentically, accepting how we really are, and think about what we want from a place of this acceptance of ourselves, we can dream in a way that can actually manifest. Because we can dream in a way that is in accordance and harmony with who we are right now. How does this allow us to question? Well, as we feel into ourselves authentically, think with increasing clarity, dream about what we would like, we can ask practical questions about how to manifest our dreams. Notice how often this does not occur. Notice how often we don't act from a place of stillness, where instead of having difficult emotions that lead us to our dreams, we have difficult emotions that take us back into our nightmares because we didn't do this emotional clearing. This is what Brené Brown was talking about in that quote that I gave a few slides ago. So it works like this. Because I've cultivated a bodily practice every day that allows me to connect into my inner stillness, that even in the midst of changes that are turbulent and difficult, I can let them pass over me from my bodily stillness of where I am, that I'm able to move into heartfelt action and receive the gift of manifesting my dreams into the world. And all of this just naturally occurs as the emergent outcome of cultivating stillness in my body before I'm in the difficult moments that come afterwards. And then I have an attenuated body. My body becomes like a musical instrument that can harmonize itself with the discord of difficulty and turn the discord of difficulty into the music of harmony by transforming it within myself. That is the healing power of stillness. I have a real life example of this in someone else. Some of you know Margarita, Tanya, who's on the call. You know who Margarita is. Say hello to Margarita, my dear friend who lives in Barichara. I want to tell you a story of inner turmoil, a story of discernment, and a story of transformation for how this stillness worked within me. I don't want to tell you Margarita's story. I'd rather she tells it herself. But I want to tell you my story of Margarita and what happened to me and how I came to a place of helping to transform her life. Because during the difficulty that I experienced in the months of December and January, when I was in my time of absolutely turbulent change, maintaining a daily practice of body work in the morning and going to the bioparque in the afternoon, and I found a deep stillness in myself. And I was in a position where a lot of my traumas and pain had to do with intimacy and vulnerability, feelings of humiliation, insecurity, and specifically how they related to love and how they related to my relationships with women. So it was during this time that I was very sensitive and very aware of how I felt in relationship to the women around me. And there was a moment when there was a woman that I felt a connection with, and I wanted to help her find a place to stay. So I asked Margarita if this person, whose name is Monica, might be able to stay at Margarita's house. Margarita responded by saying, "I'm in a crisis. I don't know how to answer that question." I could feel her inner turmoil as it related to mine. She wasn't able to help me because she needed help herself. So my place of stillness caused me to have a compassionate response, to go to Margarita and to sit down with her and try and solve her problems with her. And that was when I learned that her family and her community work were becoming jumbled together and incoherent in her home, and that she needed a new solution to enable her family, which is her husband and her son and herself, to become separate from all of the amazing community work that she does. And in this process of discernment and clarification, I started to feel how I wasn't able to relate very well with many of the women in Barichara at that time, because most of the women I knew were experiencing different kinds of trauma, going through difficult separations, having been abused, and having really pathological or unhelpful responses to other people, just being disoriented and unable to find stability and security for their own healing. And I noticed that my insecurities about women couldn't be addressed because all the women around me were in distress. And while I couldn't help them, Margarita could, because Margarita works with a lot of women in the community to help them with community healing. And it was in this way that we came to a discovery of transformation, where I had to ask Margarita's permission and her husband, Donnie. I had to ask them if I could transform their lives by raising money to support Margarita for 1 year so that she could separate her family life from her community work in the way that they manage their household, and give her an entire year of space and time to fully devote herself to the community without any need for income, so that she could help all of the women in the community who are in distress. And the important thing of this example is that it was my daily body work, and it was my turbulence and my difficulty, the struggles I had in my own emotions, that you could say were problematic, like Joe's insecure and can't relate to women right now, and he sees trauma and dysfunction all around him. And I transformed all of that into helping Margarita to become an anchor of stability for many women in the community, and the beautiful work that she does. And the thing that I want to emphasize here is that it was every morning in my daily stretch routine that I would feel these very difficult and painful emotions. I would hold them as I went through deep breathing and stretching exercises. I would move them in the movement parts of my sequence, and I would come to a place of clarity. And there was one morning when I was in the middle of my stretch routine where I had to stop it and couldn't continue stretching. And I took a walk, went to the bioparque to meditate, waited until it was late enough in the morning to send a message to Margarita, where I knew she had woken up. I sent her a message to ask her if I could come and talk to her about this transformation in her life, because I had come to the place of clarity that I could not possibly heal unless she helped to heal the other women in the community, and that I could continue in solitude, trusting the process of the healing of others if I didn't have to relate to people while I was broken, and that those people who were broken that I couldn't heal could find their own healing through someone else. And it was in that clarity that this transformation was able to be born. And I just wanted to tell you this story to show that it was my morning meditations that did this, my morning body work, stretching, breathing, and moving, that enabled me to feel and see all of the complexity of what was happening and come to a place that, very much a surprise to me, the way that I could heal depended on Margarita transforming how her family functioned in the community. You can see how that's not an obvious thing. Joe has difficulty with women and he's good friends with Margarita. I didn't have any problems with Margarita. Margarita's my dear friend. So I had to discern a very complex set of patterns in my own emotions to get to a place of clarity where I could see this pathway forward. And this, again, is the healing power of stillness. It works schematically like this. When we have pain inside ourselves, our own inner pain, we are not able to respond effectively to the suffering in others. You know, I'm messed up and I'm hurting, like the way I was in December and January in my relationship to women. And I saw women all around me suffering. So who are the women that would help me to heal? None of them. They couldn't. But I also couldn't relate to their suffering. So what I did was I held the messiness of that was able to be sustained in the stillness of my body with my body routine. And only with that holding of stillness could the healing rise to the systemic level of the entire community. You see, if I had stayed in my inner pain, unable to relate to the suffering of others, I would eventually break down and become more broken. And the suffering in others may or may not get better, but it would have nothing to do with me because I would have no way to help because I would be too busy struggling with my own inner pain. And the paradox here is that you can't address either your own inner pain or the suffering of others when you're in this situation. But if you can find stillness and acceptance because you're unable to do that, the healing at the systemic level sneaks in the calmness that arises. And it reveals itself to you in the surprising path that you could not see when you were blinded by your own pain or frustrated by the suffering in others. Holding the stillness is how the entire system of relationships around us reveals how to heal. So can you feel it? Where is your inner stillness? Have you felt it before? What was your body-based practice that took you there? Did you walk on a beach by yourself? Did you play with your dog? Did you stop and take a deep breath? Did you listen to soothing music? Did you light a candle and get lost in the flickering of the flames? Did you watch a beautiful sunset? Did you look at a picture of a loved one you've lost and feel the memories in your body? What you'll find is every time you discover inner stillness, it comes through your body and you can feel it if only you practice and learn how. And so, our work in creating stories of place and finding our belonging and designing for community and healing of territories comes about, perhaps surprisingly, by how we can find calmness in ourselves, in our own bodies. Because it is our bodies that make sense of the world, and it's our bodies that can act in love to what is happening around us. So what I'd love to do now is just invite a moment of stillness to hold what has been said. And in that moment of stillness, I'm going to give you a very simple body-based activity. Take your hand and point your fingers, your index fingers, and bring them, looking at your fingertips, and bring them until they just barely touch. And then bring them apart again. And notice how your body and your mind become calm and focused. And do it again. Notice how it feels as your fingers just barely come to touch. And then pull them apart again. What I want to demonstrate here is that there is an alignment of the sense perceptions in your body that come through focused calm with a point of attention. When I do my stretching, I focus on things like a particular ligament that's maybe in my hip rotator, or a particular part of the arching of my foot, or I breathe into the feeling of the tension in my chest muscles. I put my attention to a part of my body. And as I pay attention to that part of my body, there's a calmness that starts to arise automatically, because the part of my body that would get agitated and confused is distracted, or the energy is used by this simple focusing into one piece of the body. That's how simple it is to develop a body-based practice. The important thing is to make it a practice and do it repeatedly. To do it at the same time every day, to do it over and over again as a devotional way of living. And the stillness will grow as an expansion in your being as you do this practice continually. If you only do it once, you'll feel it for a moment and it'll go away. If you do it once a day, you'll notice it'll build up over time. And so that's how the practice of healing is very simple to do. It's just a matter of noticing its importance and building into your schedule a routine of doing it. And so I'd love to open this up for discussion. love to ask if there are any questions that come from this, any clarifying that you'd like to do, any reflections that come to mind. And if you could use the hand raising, that'll help. So I see Anna, please.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Your example there of using your fingers as a focal point. Many years ago, I was a psychotherapist, spent many years dealing with problems, but a lot of them were rooted in what people identified as attachment disorder. And this whole process of that we've talked about, pro-social skills, regenerating the earth, connecting with yourself, connecting with your body, is, the word attachment disorder was a psychological framework, but what your framework is earth and body. And just from when people are having trouble with relationships or finding place or whatever, neurologically, kids or healthy moments, people will use both hands to hold a cup. And it literally helps you feel like if you were to drink your juice up with both hands, or hold your cup of soup with both hands, it literally creates the connection between sympathetic and parasympathetic. It's a very, very natural healing response in everybody. And when, you can practice it, but I just want to state how normal, how organic that already is. And if you watch through your day, you'll find you might be doing that automatically.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anna. One of the things that's really powerful for me when I was studying a lot of cognitive and behavioral science was when I started learning cognitive neuroscience. Which I basically started learning how synchronicity occurs across different parts of the brain. And it was very interesting to look at the bilateral nature of the human brain, the left and right hemisphere. And how there's part of your brain that does the information processing for like how you listen to sound to make out words. But there's a different part of your brain that constructs words when you're speaking. So listening and speaking use different parts of the brain. And there are things like this that were increasingly clear through that kind of research. And what I loved about it was that it made it easier to see how body-based activities could become therapeutic. Like how to practice listening while you're not speaking to cultivate a different part of your body's information processing. And there are a lot of things like this that are little like tricks or techniques in a way by just understanding how the process works. And what I found from doing dance and martial arts is that I was doing therapy. I just didn't know it. I didn't know that using both sides, like I was really uncoordinated with both sides of my body. So I trained both of them. And then people thought I was naturally athletically talented. Really, I just worked my butt off to gain coordination. But I intentionally did both sides at the same time. And that cultivated an integration in my body for processing my emotions, even though I was just trying to do things like punches and kicks learning karate as a teenager. I had no idea I was cultivating body integration of my emotions too. So yeah, this part of it, this embodied cognition part is really a big deal. Claire, please.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I was thinking about just how hard it is in the societies that we're in the 24 hours a day, and the scheduling and all of that kind of overrides so much of our paying attention, and how that interrupts. I'm one of those people where I actually have to create space, because otherwise I know that I'm actually not effective contributing. I'm just going through the motions of contributing. but any creativity to the discussion is definitely hampered. Anyway, I just wondered if you could talk about, I love the practice that you spoke about, because I think that is building in that, like creating that space, even in all the chaos, but just, it just seems to me like the whole world around me is, and especially it caters to those, and I hate to say the extroverted world, like the world that just needs to be doing stuff all the time, but just that it's not normalized to create the space, and just how that wreaks havoc in just our everyday decision making, let alone just well-being. So yeah.
Yeah, this is a really great topic, Claire, and I want to just pick one part of it because there's a lot we could talk about. I want to talk about how capitalism traumatizes us. One of the ways that capitalism traumatizes us is because most of us are born into economic slavery. If you remember the webinar last week, the office worker who's in this place of needing to work to survive. And what that does is it normalizes productivity. It says you're wasting your time unless you're being productive, which means you start to have humiliation and guilt if you're not being productive. And then it becomes a reinforcer culturally that even if no one else is judging you for relaxing, you'll do it just fine for yourself. You'll judge yourself for taking the time to not be productive because it's become normative. And this is a really big deal. This is a trauma of market capitalism. Now, notice I'm not saying this ideologically. I'm not saying, and therefore capitalism is bad. I mean, I personally feel capitalism is bad, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are a set of very powerful social norms that tell us you're supposed to be busy. And there's even people who sort of talk about busyness as being like a diagnosable illness, like a psychosis, which I think is appropriate. Because, yeah, the cult of busyness, thank you, Sherry, that's what it's called, is like, when I think the most important thing I did to heal myself was when Jessica and I decided to have a child. I declared, like definitively, because of what I learned about attachment, Anna, was that I was going to spend the minimum, the first 3 years of my daughter's life, I'd be full-time with her. Because those first 3 years are when we hardwire the architecture of the brain and how the brain is able to process a lot of emotions around relationships. And if you look at Elise today at 5 years old, she's like a wizard of emotions because she has healthy human development, whereas so many kids don't. And she gets accused of being gifted simply because she has healthy emotional development, because I declared for the first 3 years, I'm full-time with my child, minimum. And if I can pull it off for longer, I will. Now, what did that mean? That meant that I spent a lot of time in a child's world. I spent a lot of time doing things like we would go walking and she would stop and want to play in a pile of dirt. So I'd just sit down and play in the dirt with her for the next half an hour. We'd make little mountains and we'd make like stick sculptures. And I became slow and peaceful in myself because I was going to connect to my child. So Elise taught me how to find this peace in myself. By saying, I'm going to give my child the developmental context she needs, I didn't know Elise was going to give me the scaffolding I needed, the social scaffolding, for me to enter into her world of innocence and slow down. And it has absolutely transformed me. The most important healing in my life has been the first 3 years of my child's life as her father, by just giving myself to the pace and rhythm of her development. I grew up with her in her first 3 years because I didn't have that in mind. And so that's just how profound this cult of busyness is that we need to address, is how to normalize the health and resilience of being human beings instead of being producing machines. This is a really big deal. Tanya, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just recall how powerful it is to have this as a daily reminder, because you can sometimes forget about, and it turns to be like this what you said about being productive and having shame of not being like doing all the time. I can feel it here, having just done this radical change of coming from Mexico City and being in an organization and quitting that, and then coming with my partner here at nature, and having this feeling of knowing that Barichara means a place to rest, and giving ourselves this time, this year that has passed, to really connect with nature, to rest, and not feeling ashamed of not being productive. But we have to stay connected and remind us that yes, we need to start focusing on what we really want to share with the world. But this time has been precious, and sometimes we do feel shame. Like yesterday, somebody came and then, well, we wonder, what do you do all day? What do you do all day? And I started to just realizing I'm really, really focused now on studying, on developing what I want to just share with the world, share with the community. And it's a daily reminder, and those activities of meditation and just observing the birds, observing the cycles of nature are precious to ground myself, to really be in stillness and calm. So thank you for that.
No, muchas gracias, Tanya. Es un regalo por la vida. It's really a gift of the lifetime. And a lot of people think I'm busy. They're like, Joe's important, quote, Joe's important, so he must be busy. It's like, Joe, I know you don't have time to talk, but I'd love to talk with you. And I'm like, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and spend 2 hours doing stretching and meditation. And that causes me to sleep 2 hours less per night because there's less tension in my body. So I don't actually lose sleep. And I go to bed earlier because I'll feel bad if I get up early if I didn't get enough sleep. And just sort of, it basically goes backward in time until my days are basically about health. And then I spend time playing with my daughter. I take long walks. I observe nature and learn how it works. I pull grass. I plant trees. I dig holes with pickaxes and shovels. I get good exercise. Everyone says, wow, this work you do is so amazing. You must be so important. And what it really is that I only do what is important in my heart. I only do that and I don't do anything else. It took me a long time to learn this, long time. And now I only do what's important in my heart. And that's why it accumulates. Where after 6 months of that, people say, wow, Joe, look at what you did. It's like, yeah, because I did it every day for like an hour. You know, I go to the bioparque from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. every afternoon. And in 10 months, we have created this like kernel of a food forest, and everyone thinks it's beautiful. And it's because I go there every day. But I didn't go there to be productive. I went there to heal. I spent a lot of days just sitting on rocks. And so yeah, Tanya sat next to me on one of those rocks. They're really nice. And so I just wanted to emphasize how important that is. It's more important than we can imagine. And now, Bunny, please, I'd love to hear from you.
Hello, thank you. I really have absolutely loved today's presentation. It is so reflective of the journey that I've been on for years, and that has just really reached a peak as I've moved to this land that we're on now. My practice of dance and a simultaneous calling to meditate has grown in parallel with my knowing of land and my relationship to land. They're blossoming together side by side. So I just love and appreciate everything that you said, and I find it to be absolutely true. But there's also this other thing, this current that I noticed sort of in the back of my mind as I took in everything you were saying. And so I have some reflections on it. I'm also curious about what you think about this. It took me so long to get to this point where I have this practice and that it's blossoming and it's showing to be fruitful in ways that I never thought. It started with just moving out of an apartment into a rental house with more light. Started that small, you know? And now that I'm on this land, oh my gosh, it's unreal. It's unreal getting to watch the sunset every night. When I take my dog out to go to the bathroom in the morning, which was never any kind of meditative body connection practice before, suddenly is this opportunity for me to be invited into stillness and to notice nature and what's happening. And I'm learning so much in those unproductive moments, you know? But I think back to before I moved into that house with more light, before we were able to land here and have so much exposure to raw nature. And I think about all the intensity inside of me, all of the trauma inside of me, and how I hadn't matured to a place where I could hold myself in stillness. And I think of all the anger and the rage that I feel like, I don't know if it's that stillness couldn't hold it or if I wasn't mature enough to know how to allow that process to unfold. And so there's this thought that I'm thinking that says, because of everything you just discussed, capitalism and all that stuff, because of just this onslaught, busyness, the cult of busyness, it's like there's just so much built up in so many of us that like we can't be still. We're just, you know. And so I think of the person who just burned down Bodhicitta, and I think, were they one of those people? Were they unable? Something wasn't there, and so that energy came out in fire. You know, that it takes. Sorry, just let me slow myself down here. It's all trying to bubble up.
Please go on. This is beautiful. Please continue.
I guess I'm just sensing that to get to the place that you described, it takes time. Sometimes that's one thing. It takes time to mature to that place. It also may take other things, like the people that are around you who are helping to send signals that you can pick up on and create a safe space. It may take, you know, for me, like I said, getting here on this land, it just has opened up so much that wasn't previously there when I was in a tiny apartment. So it takes the environment. And if you don't have those things, then my sensing is that you're like a time bomb, you know, and you will explode and you will set something on fire. I think of the anti-racist movements that I wander in sometimes. And there's this one lady, she has a platform, if you will, called the Nap Ministry. And her tagline is, "Rest is resistance." And she just promotes taking a nap, and she uplifts, showing pictures of Black people just laying around doing nothing, you know, and it's wonderful. But at the same time, I also encounter in that space this conversation that says that anger inside is justifiable, it's understandable, and you can't hold it in. So don't ask me to do it. I'm not going to do it. It's not healthy for me. So there's this simultaneous sort of movement of like allowing for that rage to come out. And so I don't know, I haven't sorted out sort of both sides, you know. I know it's not healthy to hold in a lot of this stuff. And yet I also just sense that from my own journey, that there were times where I wasn't able to or mature enough to enter the kind of space that you're describing. And then now I find myself in. So that's the best I can express it right now, if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I wanted to name something, which is one of the other reframings we need to do is to reframe the negativity of emotions. Like anger. Anger is generally treated as a bad thing. Like that's sort of a normative judgment that's often applied. You shouldn't get angry. If you get angry, you might hurt something, et cetera, et cetera. For me, anger is like fire. And that's the closest element it is to. If you try and contain fire, it's going to build up pressure and explode. All right. Whereas, and fire can burn your house down. But fire also can give you the warmth and comfort of community, and it can cook your dinner. And so it's amazing about anger when we recognize its true nature, rather than seeing it as negative, is that anger is like fire. Fire is a chemical process of consumption, which just says if there is a material that can be consumed by the burning process, and there's oxygen present and it's hot, then the fire is just going to go wherever the food is. And if you want to put out the fire, you take away the food supply, which would be like, dispersing your campfire so that it doesn't have the concentrated core of wood or whatever it may be. But the other thing is, you can't put out a fire by trying to calm it. What you have to do is give the energy a place to go. And one thing I learned, because I did martial arts as a teenager, was I did things like board breaking, where someone would hold a board and you'd hit it. And I learned how to concentrate and focus my anger. Physically, I did it by learning how to break boards. But then later, I learned all kinds of ways to turn my anger into actions I cared about, but there's a very important clarification. I had to know what to direct my anger toward. That was the hard part. So sometimes my anger needed to be directed toward action. Sometimes my anger needed to make myself frustrated while not taking action. Sometimes anger meant I needed to break something. Sometimes anger meant I needed to energetically build something. And so the art of anger turned out to be how to use it, not whether it was good or bad. It was recognizing it's always useful for something, and I have it anyway. And so the acceptance of anger was the key. And I think this is true for the other emotions as well. And this relates to what you were saying about contexts. That if we don't have a supportive context, this gets really hard. And I want to name a very important social psychology study, which was there was a unique data set from a village in, I think it was in Minnesota, might have been Wisconsin, but I think it was Minnesota, where they gathered data from the same people over the span of about 40 years. And they asked them health-related behavioral questions like, how often do you drink alcohol per week? Do you smoke and how often? And those kinds of questions. But what was interesting was they also asked about their peers. So they would say, how often do you drink alcohol per week? And what about your coworkers? And so they ended up gathering a data set that allowed them to look at social networks. And this was actually the beginning of network science for social science. So there's Fowler and Christakis, or James Fowler and Nicholas Christakis are the authors of this study. They had a unique data set that allowed them to see changing social patterns across networks of peers. And what they observed was that behavioral change was about 85% of it was predictable by your peers. So if you tried to quit smoking but didn't change your friends, you would just fall right back into smoking. But if you and your friends all quit smoking together, you could quit smoking. Or if you didn't want to smoke, but your friends did, you would change your friends and find friends who didn't smoke. And they found that 85% of the success across decades, for every behavioral change, 85% of it was peer reinforcement. So it turns out the most important way to change your behavior is to change the behavior of who you choose to be around. See how surprising that is? Because we have so much individualism, it tells us, well, I have to have the willpower to change myself. Fuck that. Humans are social. The way you do it is you gather around people who behave the way you want to behave. And if you can't find them, cultivate solitude and just remove the peer influence. So in the last year, I spent a lot of time in solitude because I was around a peer group of parents and kids that I didn't want to be like. I like them and care about them as people. I didn't want to be like them. I chose to be alone instead of being with them because I was cultivating different behaviors. And I was learning pro-social by teaching it and practicing it in Earth Regenerators. So I was in a peer group of my choosing by being in environments like this one, until I built up enough body practice that I could easily do it on my own. That's the scaffolding part. And so this is a really powerful thing. You have tremendous power to choose who you're going to be friends with. And the scary part is sometimes you have to choose to be alone because you don't have good friend choices. I'm imagining a lot of women can relate to being in a place where there's no good people to date, so you just stay alone. Like the dating pool isn't very good. It's that, except for friends. It's that is incredible, because you will find the stillness in yourself through self-knowledge. And then you'll know how to relate back to people when you re-enter into the community. And so I just wanted to really honor what you're saying, Bunny, about how this is actually quite difficult and complex. And that the important thing is to understand the importance of it, and then to find the best way for ourselves to cultivate these practices. And that sometimes it's changing our environment, and sometimes it's changing our friend group, which is part of our environment. Sometimes it's just doing an activity we hadn't done in a while and starting it again. Midi, I see you've got your hand up. What would you like to share?
Just simply to honor this network, because one of the things I've observed over the years now nearly that I've been here is the capacity of different groups to be able to sit together in relative stillness and silence. When I first joined, I don't think there was a group that was still or silent, but now I notice it particularly in campfires, in bioregional catalysts. There's a group that can really sit together and be still and be silent. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue. And I'm so grateful for today's webinar, Joe. It's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Midi. And I'd like to bring us to a close, and by saying that I'd like for us to observe the topics we've explored and how surprising they are. That when we started this journey 5 weeks ago, we're going to explore pro-social groups for territories. And what we've come to is why we don't feel like we belong, how to be found by others who need us, how to explore our stories, and how to connect to our bodies and find stillness. And I just wanted to point out how important it is that the stillness that we have in the host team each week in our Tuesday calls, we have a moment where we discover together what needs to happen next. And until that moment, we have no idea what the next topic will be. So we're actually practicing this collectively. And that's why these topics are so surprising. I didn't know we were going to do these topics. None of us did. And that's the beauty of stillness, is it's incredibly productive because it's like acupuncture. You don't need to take much action, because when you do take action, it has such an impact. Then mostly you're just being prepared by being in the right relationship to how you might act. That when called upon to act, you automatically know what to do. You do it with full energy and all of your heart, and it has a beautiful effect. And most of the time, it'll look like you're not doing much. If someone followed me around with a secret camera, they'd be like, well, Joe walks around, he looks at things, he plays with his kid, what's he actually doing? Whereas if you looked at my productivity, like all these things happening, and you wrongly said that Joe was doing all of them, like Joe's doing everything in Earth Regenerators or any other of these mistaken forms of causation that are so easy to do. It's like, wow, Joe's amazing, look what he does. He must be so busy. And the secret is right relationship. The secret is that we know how to be still, to know which way to direct our energy in the moment. It's like the Aikido master that stands in the center of a circle and is attacked by people on every side and never moves more than like 2 feet from where they're standing. Because all they do is just redirect the energy of everyone else while staying in their center. So if you'd like a little homework activity to help you practice this, just go on YouTube and type in like great Aikido demonstrations or something like that and watch an Aikido master. And just notice how they barely move. They're in the middle of intense action, but they're calm and centered. And they are the quintessence of stillness because they've trained it for decades. And they were not naturally that way, except they were. So if you recall that picture of Elise in Lake Atitlan, we know how to be still in ourselves until the world around us breaks it. So one of the best things we can do is protect the children from this, so they never have to go through the process Bunny described, where it can take years to heal from this. It can take years or decades to heal. And if we can bypass that with the children where they don't have to heal because they were never broken, that's way better. And it's just a better life for the kids. And for us as adults, we can forgive ourselves for it taking a while, if it takes a while. So I want to thank you all for the stillness that we can feel in this moment right now as we're sitting together, appreciating what it means to connect to our bodies in the moment. And that every wisdom tradition tells us to do this. This isn't a secret. We just have to slow down enough to remember to do it. That's all. It's practice more than knowledge. It's practice. We have to embody it in our practice. And if we do that, we will be transformed. If there are things we don't like in our lives, we will let them go. And our lives will become filled with that emptiness that remains, will be filled with what we intend to invite in. And that too is the practice of stillness. So thank you, everyone. So delighted. And I'm looking forward to more. Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Thank